When people hear about a mother and son, they imagine something bright. Children come to their mothers for advice, support, and comfort. Mothers lend a helping hand when their children are struggling. At least that's how it should be. But what if your son is only interested in what you can do for him? What if his love has a price? My name is Marilyn Pemberton. I am 68 years old, and I live in Des Plaines, Illinois. For almost 40 years, I worked as a tax planner for a small company. Numbers have always been closer to me than people. They don't lie, betray, or abandon you in your old age. Henry, my husband, passed away 3 years ago. A heart attack, sudden and merciless like a bolt of lightning. We had been together for 42 years. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but we stuck together through thick and thin. His last words were for me not to be alone. After the funeral, our son Elliot suggested I move in with him. He said there was room for me in their big house in the suburbs. He said the children needed their grandmother and that his wife, Imogen, could use some help. At the time, it seemed like the right decision. I sold the house Henry and I had owned, put the money into a retirement fund, and moved in with my son. I thought I would start a new chapter in my life, that I would be needed. The first few months went relatively well. I got used to their family routine and found my place. Elliot worked as a quality control inspector in the food industry and often worked late. Imogen, a clinical research coordinator, was also busy at work. Their children, my grandchildren, Holden, 10, and Willow, 7, were left to their own devices. I became their rock. I got up at 6 in the morning, made breakfast, got the kids ready for school, and walked them to the bus stop. Then I did the housework. Laundry, ironing, cleaning, cooking. The kids came home around 3 in the afternoon. I helped them with their homework, fed them snacks, and kept them entertained. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I took Holden to soccer practice, and on Wednesdays and Fridays, I took Willow to dance class. In my free time, I tried to build a relationship with my daughter-in-law. Imogen always kept her distance. She was 30 years younger than me, slim, fit, with perfect manicures and a perpetually dissatisfied expression on her face. She wrinkled her nose at my culinary experiments, claiming that they were watching their cholesterol and sugar. She responded curtly to my attempts to discuss parenting. Elliot and I will figure it out ourselves, thank you. The first cracks appeared when I tried to help with the family budget. After all, 40 years of experience in finance is quite a lot. I noticed that they were spending too much on unnecessary things and their credit cards were constantly maxed out. Elliot, honey, I looked at your bills. I think I could help you put together a more reasonable budget, I suggested at dinner. He put down his fork and looked at me as if I had suggested something indecent. Mum, we're fine. Don't meddle in our business. I just wanted to help. Imogen said you were planning to renovate, and I thought, Imogen and I should be thinking about that. It's our house and our money, he snapped. Imogen shot me a triumphant look. From that day on, I stayed away from their finances, although I often saw notices of overdue payments in their mail. Months passed, and my position in the house became increasingly precarious. I felt like I was turning into a ghost, used but unseen. Elliot came home late, barely said hello, and buried himself in his phone or the TV. Imogen avoided me as if I had a contagious disease. Only the children were genuinely happy to see me. One day, I overheard Imogen talking to her mother on the phone. She sticks her nose into everything. She's cooking her old-fashioned food. The children are starting to talk like her. Yesterday, Willow said, "Darling." Can you imagine, in 2025? I understand she's Elliot's mother, but sometimes I just can't. I quietly closed the door and went to my room, a small room at the far end of the hallway, the former guest room that had been assigned to me. There I kept the remnants of my former life, a few photographs, books Henry had given me for my birthday, a jewelry box with pieces I no longer wore. By spring, the relationship had grown even colder. Now Imogen openly criticized everything I did. My cooking, too greasy. My manner of dress, like something from the last century. Even the way I spoke to her grandchildren. You don't need to tell them those outdated stories. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. One evening, while cleaning Holden's room, I found a school essay. My Family, it was titled. I couldn't help but read it. My grandmother lives with us because she's old and doesn't have any money. Dad says we have to take care of her, even though it's hard. Mum says Grandma is sometimes a nuisance, but I like it when she helps me with math. She knows a lot about numbers. Tears welled up in my eyes. So that's how they talk about me to the children. That I'm a burden? A helpless old woman without a penny to her name. But I gave them almost all of my pension, considering it a contribution to the family budget. I bought groceries, paid for extra lessons for the children, and even paid for Holden's math tutor out of my savings. That evening, I tried to talk to Elliot. You know, son, I feel a little unnecessary in your house. He looked up from his phone with irritation. What are you talking about, Mum? We give you a roof over your head, food, everything you need. That's not the point. I'm grateful for everything. But the attitude. Imogen hardly ever talks to me. You're always busy. I feel more like a servant than a member of the family. Don't be dramatic, he sighed. Everyone has their own problems. We work, we get tired. We don't always have the energy to entertain you as well. Entertain me? My voice trembled. I'm not asking you to entertain me. I'm asking for basic respect. Let's not do this, okay? I've had a hard day. Problems at work. Imogen is stressed. Just do what you were doing. Everything's fine. But nothing was fine. Every day I felt more and more alone. I started calling Octavia, my daughter, more often than usual. She lived in Oregon and worked as an emergency dispatcher. She had her own life, her own problems, but she always found time to listen to me. Mum, why don't you move in with me? She suggested. No, sweetie. You've just started your own life. Besides, Holden and Willow need me. That was only partly true. I was afraid of change. I was afraid of starting over again. And I admit I hoped that one day Elliot would see how much I was doing for his family and appreciate it. But instead of gratitude, I got more criticism. Imogen complained that I spoiled the children too much. Elliot grumbled that I didn't buy the right groceries. Even my habit of getting up early was a source of discontent. Apparently, I was making too much noise and disturbing their sleep. Nevertheless, I tried to maintain my dignity. Henry always said, Marilyn, no matter what happens, keep your back straight. And I did, even when I felt like I was about to burst with resentment. Strangely, my grandchildren were the only ones who truly appreciated my presence. Holden loved it when I helped him with his math. Willow loved to hear stories about how Henry and I met, how we got married, how we raised their father. Those were moments of light in the gathering darkness. In November of that year, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, something happened that turned everything upside down. It was a normal Thursday, an unremarkable day. I was making dinner, chicken casserole, Holden's favourite. Imogen came home from work early, clearly in a bad mood. She threw her bag on the table and headed for the refrigerator to get a bottle of wine. Bad day? I asked cautiously. That's an understatement, she muttered, pouring herself a glass. What are you making? Chicken casserole. Holden asked for it yesterday, she grimaced. Again? I thought we agreed to eat healthier. But the kids love it. Kids love candy, but that doesn't mean you have to give it to them, she snapped. Seriously, Marilyn, sometimes I think you're doing this on purpose. I continued cooking in silence. I have learned not to get involved in these arguments. It's useless. But my hands were shaking uncontrollably. As I took the plates out of the cupboard, I didn't notice that one of them slipped out. The sound of broken porcelain echoed through the kitchen. Oh my God, Marlene! Imogen exclaimed. That was from my set. My mother gave us that set for our wedding. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll buy a new one, I said, kneeling down to gather the pieces. You'll buy one? With what? Your pathetic pension, she was almost shouting. They don't make that set anymore. At that moment, Elliot returned. He entered the kitchen and glanced around at the scene, the broken plate, his distraught wife, and me kneeling among the shards. What's going on here? Imogen rushed to him. Your mother broke a plate from my mother's set, the wedding one. Elliot looked at me and I saw in his eyes not my son, but a stranger, an angry man. Mum, you have to be more careful. he said coldly. That set means a lot to Imogen. I didn't do it on purpose, son, I began, but he interrupted me. I know, you never do anything on purpose, he sighed. Just be more careful, okay? And by the way, we were talking about healthy eating. What kind of casserole is this again? Dinner was spent in tense silence. Holden ate his casserole with gusto, but Imogen just poked at her plate with her fork, sighing demonstratively. Elliot ate quickly and went to his study, claiming he had urgent work to do. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and went to my room, feeling a heavier weight on my shoulders with every step. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to the ticking of the old clock and thinking about how everything had changed. Elliot used to be a little boy who ran to me with his joys and sorrows. I remember bandaging his skinned knees, reading him books before bed, teaching him to ride a bike. And now he looks at me as if I'm an annoying obstacle in his perfect life. In the morning, while getting the kids ready for school, I discovered that Holden's uniform hadn't been washed. Imogen had promised to do it, but she forgot. I quickly washed it and dried it with a hairdryer, but we still missed the bus. I had to call a taxi, spending money from my already modest pension. When Imogen found out about the taxi, she rolled her eyes and muttered something about pointless spending. I wanted to explain that I had no choice, but I kept quiet. I promised myself that next time I would check the uniform in advance and not rely on my daughter-in-law's promises. The day dragged on as usual. Cleaning, laundry, preparing dinner for when the children returned. At 2 o'clock, I went to the store for groceries. On the way, I met Mrs. Chang, a neighbour with whom I sometimes exchanged a few words. "How are you, Marilyn?" she asked with sincere warmth. "Fine, thank you," I lied, forcing a smile. "How are your grandchildren? Growing up fast, I bet?" "Yes, very quickly. Holden is already in 5th grade, and Willow—" I couldn't finish. My throat tightened with emotion. I loved my grandchildren unconditionally, despite all the problems with their parents. "They're lucky to have a grandmother like you," Mrs. Cheng remarked. "Not everyone can boast of being so well cared for these days." Her words warmed my heart, but they also reminded me of the bitter reality. In my own family, my care was taken for granted, unappreciated, even considered a burden. At the store, I carefully selected groceries, checking my list of the family's preferences and restrictions. Imogen didn't eat gluten. Elliot watched his sugar. Holden didn't like broccoli. And Willow was picky about the texture of certain foods. It was like solving a complex puzzle, finding foods that would satisfy everyone and stay within the budget. When I got home, the kids were already there. The school bus had brought them home early because of a teacher conference I had forgotten about. They were sitting in front of the TV, munching on chips. "Grandma!" Willow exclaimed happily when she saw me. "We're home early." "I see, sweetie. Why are you eating chips?" "I was going to make dinner." "We were hungry," Holden shrugged. "And you weren't here." I quickly made them sandwiches with fresh vegetables to make up for the unhealthy snack. Then I helped them with their homework and sent them out to play in the yard while I prepared dinner. Imogen returned in the evening in a bad mood as usual. She glanced at the table where I was setting out a green salad, baked fish, and quinoa, all her favourites. "I asked you to cook less," she sighed. "Elliot and I are having dinner out tonight, a business meeting. But you didn't say—" "I sent you a text," she said, showing me her phone. Sure enough, there was a message sent at noon. But my old push-button phone didn't have all the modern features, and I rarely checked it during the day. "I'm sorry, I didn't see it." "What about the kids?" "We'll order them pizza," Imogen shrugged. "They'll be thrilled." Once again, my efforts were wasted. I put the food away in containers, suppressing my disappointment. So much time and effort wasted, and the kids would be eating unhealthy food that Imogen was so against. Elliot came home late, and he and Imogen quickly got changed and left. I stayed with the kids, helped them with their homework, made sure they took their evening showers, and read Willow a bedtime story. When they fell asleep, I sat in the living room for a long time, looking at the photos on the walls. A happy family. Elliot, Imogen, the kids. I wasn't in those photos. The next morning, the same thing happened. Imogen forgot to sign Willow's permission slip for the field trip, and I had to call her at work to get verbal confirmation for the teacher. Elliot forgot his lunch and I took him to work in a taxi, spending my own money again. In the evening, I tried to talk to my son again when he finally took a minute away from his phone. Elliot, I think we need to discuss some things, I began cautiously. What things? He didn't even look up. My position here. I feel like I'm doing the work of a nanny and a housekeeper, but no one cares about my opinion. Mom, he finally looked at me. You live in our house for free. We feed you, provide you with everything you need. Yes, you help with the kids and the house, but isn't that natural? It's your contribution. I don't mind helping, son, but I'd like to feel like part of the family, not a servant. You're exaggerating as usual, he shook his head. No one treats you like a servant. Then what do you call it? I cook, clean, take care of the children, spend my pension on your family, but as soon as I express an opinion or do something my way, there's a problem. See? His voice became harsher. You admit yourself that you do everything your way, ignoring our requests. That's not what I meant. You know what, Mum? I'm tired of these conversations. If you're so unhappy here, maybe you should consider other options. Those words hurt the most. My own son was hinting that I could leave if I didn't like something. Where? To a nursing home? Or to Octavia, who was just starting to build a life for herself? I just want a little respect, Elliot. Is that too much to ask? Respect has to be earned, Mum, he snapped, returning to his phone to signal that the conversation was over. I went to my room holding back tears. In my room, I took out a photo of Henry. He was smiling as if he was still there, as if everything were fine. What should I do, Henry? I whispered. But the photo remained silent. Henry could no longer give me advice or support me. I was alone in a house full of people. After talking to Elliot, I slept poorly. I tossed and turned all night, thinking about how quickly relationships that had been built over decades could fall apart. In the morning, I woke up feeling broken, but forced myself to get up at the usual time, 6 o'clock. The children shouldn't have to suffer because of my problems with their parents. It was Tuesday, the day Holden had football practice after school. I automatically made breakfast, packed lunchboxes, and checked school backpacks. My hands did the usual work, but my mind was far away. I thought about my life, the decisions that had led me here, and whether there was a way out of this situation. Imogen came down to breakfast first, as usual, in a perfectly ironed blouse and with her hair immaculately styled. She gave me a cold look, poured herself some coffee, and buried her face in her phone. I set a plate of whole grain toast and avocado in front of her, just the way she liked it. Thanks, she muttered without looking up. That cold thanks was more than I usually got, and I was almost happy. Maybe my conversation with Elliot yesterday had changed something. Maybe they had discussed the situation and decided to treat me differently. Elliot came downstairs, followed by the sleepy children. I put his favourite ham and cheese omelette in front of my son and cereal with milk, and sliced fruit for the kids. I didn't eat breakfast myself. I couldn't swallow a bite. Grandma, will you take me to soccer today? Holden asked, his mouth full of cereal. Of course, sweetie, I smiled, like always. Will you watch me play? Last time you sat and watched. If you want me to, I'll definitely watch. Elliot looked up from his plate and glanced at his son. Holden, Grandma doesn't have to sit through the whole practice. She has things to do. What things? The boy asked innocently. She's always at home. It doesn't matter, Elliot snapped. Just don't make her sit on a cold bench for 2 hours. I wanted to argue, to say that I liked watching Holden play, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to start the day with another conflict. After breakfast, I walked the children to the bus stop, waved goodbye, and returned to the house. Imogen had already left for work, and Elliot was getting ready. He was standing in the hallway, checking his briefcase. Elliot, I began cautiously, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. And? He didn't even look up. Maybe we should set some rules, clear responsibilities. That way it will be clearer what you expect from me. He finally looked at me, his gaze full of irritation. Mum, I'm late. Can we talk about this tonight? Sure, I nodded. Have a good day. He left without even saying goodbye. I was left alone in the big, empty house that would never be my home. The day dragged on as usual. I cleaned up, made dinner, picked up the kids from school, and took Holden to soccer practice. Contrary to Elliot's words, I stayed to watch practice. I sat on the bench, wrapped in an old coat, watching my grandson run across the field, full of energy and joy. These were the moments that made it worth enduring the cold bench and the coldness of his parents' relationship. The evening came faster than I would have liked. Imogen came home from work in a bad mood. Something had obviously gone wrong at work. She barely said hello and went to her bedroom complaining of a headache. I helped the children with their homework, made sure they got their evening routine done, and put them to bed. All this time, I was waiting for Elliot to come home so we could finally talk. He had promised to discuss the situation in the evening. He came home late, around 11. I heard the front door slam and came out of my room. Elliot was standing in the hallway, smelling of alcohol. "Were you waiting for me?" he asked when he saw me. "Yes, we agreed to talk, remember?" "Now." He looked at his watch. "It's 11 o'clock at night, Mom. You said, tonight. I've been waiting all day." He sighed and went into the kitchen. I followed him. He took a bottle of water out of the refrigerator and sat down at the table. "Okay, let's talk," he said, but his tone made it clear that the conversation would be short. "Elliot, I want us to find a way to live together without constant tension," I began. "Maybe if we clearly define my responsibilities—" "Responsibilities?" he interrupted. "You're my mother, not my employee. You don't have responsibilities." "Then why do I feel like a maid? Why is it that every time I do something that Imogen doesn't want me to do, it becomes a problem?" "Because this is our home, Mom." His voice grew louder. "We make the rules. We decide how to raise the children, what to cook, how everything should be." "I understand, but—" "No, you don't!" He slammed his fist on the table. "You do everything your own way. You cook fatty foods even though you know we're watching our health. You tell the children stories that we consider outdated. You spend money on taxis when you could wait for the bus." "I'm trying to help." My voice trembled. "I give you most of my pension. I take care of your children. I run the household." "Oh, is that it?" He smiled bitterly. "You think you're paying for your living expenses? That you bought your place in our family?" "No, that's not what I meant." "I didn't ask you to give me money. I didn't ask you to sit at Holden's football games. I didn't ask you to cook your old-fashioned meals." At that moment, Imogen entered the kitchen in her robe, awakened by our voices. "What's going on?" she asked, squinting in the bright light. "Mom thinks we should be grateful to her for everything she does," Elliot replied. "That's not what I said," I exclaimed. "No? Then what did she say?" He turned to Imogen. "She's complaining that we treat her like a servant even though she gives us her pension." Imogen crossed her arms over her chest. "Marilyn, if you're so unhappy here, why don't you move in with Octavia or to a nursing home? They'll take care of you there." "I don't want to be a burden to Octavia," I replied quietly. "And I don't want to go to a nursing home. I want to be with my family." "Then accept the family rules," Imogen said sharply. "Stop undermining my authority in front of... Say... Stop doing everything your own way." "I never..." "Yesterday," she interrupted, "you gave Willow cookies before bed, even though you know we don't allow sweets at night. The day before yesterday, you told Holden it was okay if he didn't do his extra math homework, even though I insisted he do it. The boy is tired. He's been studying all day. See?" Elliot turned to me. "You always know better. You always think we're too strict, that we're raising our children wrong. I just want them to have a childhood." My voice trembled. "I want them to not only study, but also play and enjoy life." "That's not your business," Elliot shouted. "They're our children, not yours. You've already played out your role as a mother." His words hit me like a slap in the face. I recoiled, feeling tears welling up in my throat. "Elliot, I'm your mother. So what? I'm supposed to let you boss me around in my own house just because you gave birth to me 60 years ago? 42 years ago, I corrected automatically. "What's the difference?" He splashed his hands. "The point is, you live in our house, you enjoy our hospitality, and you think you can tell us how to live. I never told you. You do it all the time. With your size, your looks, your... I'm just suggesting." Do you think we don't see how you judge us? Elliot, please. I reached out to touch his shoulder, but he pulled away. Don't touch me, he snapped. I'm tired of this. Tired of coming home and feeling like a bad son, a bad father. Tired of your manipulation. Manipulation? I couldn't believe my ears. When have I manipulated you? Always, he was already shouting. I'm giving you my pension. I'm taking care of your children. As if we're forcing you. As if you're not living here for free. Elliot, Imogen intervened, putting her hand on his shoulder. The children are asleep. Quiet. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. You know what, Mum? I thought I was doing a good thing when I invited you to live with us. I thought I was helping you, but it turns out that you're condescendingly helping us, thinking we're incompetent. No, son, that's not true. Enough! He raised his hand to stop me. I can't do this anymore. I really can't. You're no use to anyone. You're nothing but trouble. Those words echoed in my head. You're no use to anyone. It was as if my whole life, everything I had ever done meant nothing. As if I were just a burden, a useless old object. If that's how you feel, my voice was barely audible, maybe I really should leave. Yes, Elliot exclaimed. Maybe it'll be better for everyone. Elliot, Imogen intervened again. It's late. Let's discuss this in the morning when everyone has calmed down. But he was too heated. No, enough procrastinating. We've been going around in circles for months. I'll be blunt. Mum, I want you to move out. Find yourself another place to live. We'll help you out financially at first, but I can't live like this anymore. You're kicking me out. I couldn't believe what was happening. I'm offering you the chance to start a new life, he said harshly. You just said yourself that you were ready to leave. I didn't think you'd agree so easily. Tears were already streaming down my cheeks. Don't make me out to be the villain, he raised his voice. You created this situation yourself, with your constant dissatisfaction, your complaints. Fine, I straightened up, wiping away my tears. I'll leave, but give me time to find a place to live. A week or two. No, he snapped. I want you to leave now. Now? I couldn't believe my ears. It's night time. Where am I supposed to go? A hotel, Elliot shrugged. I'll give you money. You can't do this to your mother. I grabbed the edge of the table, feeling my legs give way. I can and I am. His eyes were cold. Go, Mom. Go before we say something we'll regret. We already have, I whispered. You already said it. He turned away, unable to look me in the eye. Pack your things. I'll call a taxi. As if in a dream, I went to my room. My hands were shaking as I pulled the suitcase out from under the bed, the same one I had arrived with 3 years ago. I mechanically folded my clothes, books, and photographs. Tears fell on my belongings, but I didn't notice. One thought echoed in my head. My son is kicking me out of the house in the middle of the night. When I came out into the hallway with my suitcase, the taxi was already waiting. Elliot stood at the door, handing me an envelope. Here's some money to get you started, he said, not looking me in the eye. And a note with the address of a motel. I called, they're waiting for you. I took the envelope with trembling hands. What about the children? What are you going to tell them? The truth, that you've decided to live separately. You're making me out to be the villain, I said bitterly. Don't be dramatic, Mom, it's just life. Sometimes it's better for people to live apart. I wanted to argue, to scream that this wasn't just life, that a son shouldn't kick his mother out of her home in the middle of the night, that it was cruel and wrong. But I had no strength left. I just nodded and headed for the door. Goodbye, Elliot, I said, turning back one last time. Tell the kids I love them. He didn't answer, just closed the door behind me. The taxi took me away into the night, into the unknown. I looked out the window at the streets of Des Plaines, rushing by, the city that had been my home for almost my entire life, and I felt like a stranger, homeless, unwanted. The motel was exactly as I had imagined it, cheap, shabby, with a flashing sign and worn-out furniture. The clerk, an elderly man with tired eyes, didn't even seem surprised to see an older woman with a suitcase in the middle of the night. He had probably seen worse. "Room 23 at the end of the hall," he said, handing me the key. "Breakfast is from 7 to 9, but it's just coffee and donuts." I thanked him and trudged to the room he had indicated. The room was clean but dreary. A bed, a nightstand, an old TV and a tiny bathroom. I put my suitcase against the wall, sat down on the edge of the bed, and finally let the tears flow. I cried for a long time, crying out all the pain, all the humiliation, all the disappointment. I cried for my son, whom I felt I had lost, for my grandchildren, whom I would no longer see every day, for myself, an old woman who had become useless to everyone. When the tears stopped, I felt a strange emptiness. It was as if a part of me had gone with the tears. The naive part that believed that family would always support you, that blood ties were the strongest bond in the world. I took out my phone, thinking about calling Octavia, but what would I say to her? That her brother had kicked me out of the house? That I was now living in a cheap motel? She would drop everything and rush to help, but she had her own life and her own problems. I couldn't burden her with this too. No, I had to cope on my own. All my life I had been a strong, independent woman. I had raised children, worked, and run a household. I could take care of myself now. In the morning, after a sleepless night, I took a shower, got dressed, and went to breakfast. Really just coffee and donuts in a small room next to the reception desk. I didn't feel like eating, but I forced myself to drink the coffee. I needed strength. Afterwards, I sat down at the table in my room and started planning. The envelope Elliot had given me contained $2,000, a decent amount, but not for the long term. My pension was $1,800 a month. Modest, but livable. The problem was that rental housing in Des Plaines cost at least $1,000 a month, if not more. After paying for housing, there was very little left for food, medicine, and other expenses. The first thing I had to do was find a job. Yes, I was 68, but I was in good shape, had a clear mind, and had a wealth of experience in finance. Surely there must be something, maybe part-time work in accounting or as a tax consultant. I opened my laptop, old but functional, and started searching. It quickly became clear that finding a job at my age would not be easy. Most of the job listings required energetic, young, and active employees. I sent out a few resumes, but I didn't have high hopes. The next step was to look for cheaper housing. The motel cost $60 a night, too expensive for a long stay. I found a few studio apartments on the outskirts of town and wrote down the phone numbers to call later. My head was spinning from exhaustion and stress, but I forced myself to act methodically, step by step. As I had once taught my clients, when it comes to financial matters, emotions are a poor advisor. Follow the plan and everything will work out. By lunchtime, I was hungry. My body was demanding food despite my emotional turmoil. There was a small fast food restaurant next to the motel. I ordered the cheapest lunch and sat by the window, watching the cars go by. One of them could have been my grandchildren. Maybe Elliot was taking them to school or to some activity. The thought that I would not see them grow up and change pierced my heart with sharp pain. After lunch, I started calling landlords. The first 2 calls were unsuccessful. The apartments had already been rented. The third option seemed promising. A small studio in an old building, $700 a month, including utilities. Not luxurious, but a roof over my head. I arranged to see it the next day. That evening, lying on the hard motel bed, I thought about how quickly life could change. Just yesterday, I had a home, a family, certainty. Today, I had a cheap motel and a completely unknown future. But strangely, along with despair, I began to feel something else. Perhaps the first glimmers of freedom. No more pleasing Imogen, putting up with Elliot's contempt, watching my every word and movement. Maybe there's something good in this. With this timid hope, I fell into a restless sleep. Tomorrow will be a new day, and I will meet it with my head held high. As Henry always said, Marilyn, whatever happens, keep your back straight. And I will. 2 weeks had passed since I moved into the Blue Moon Motel. 2 loads of laundry at the laundromat around the corner, 14 breakfasts of cheap donuts and instant coffee, endless hours of job hunting. The motel gradually became my home, dull, temporary, but still a home. I tried to maintain a routine to keep from slipping into depression. I got up at 7, had breakfast, then went out to look for work or a place to live. I had lunch at a cheap diner nearby where I could get a decent soup and sandwich for $5. I spent my evenings in my room reading books from the local library or watching old movies on a small TV. Finding a job turned out to be harder than I expected. In 2 weeks, I sent out dozens of resumes and went to 5 interviews, but was politely rejected everywhere. We're looking for someone with experience in new programs. We need a full-time employee. Unfortunately, this position requires more mobility. Polite phrases that hid the simple truth. I was too old for them. Things were a little better with housing. I found a tiny studio in an old house on the outskirts of Des Plaines. $650 a month, including utilities. The room was little bigger than a closet, with a shared kitchen on the floor and a bathroom you could barely turn around in. But it was a roof over my head, and the landlord didn't require a long-term lease. I could pay month to month. I planned to move there at the end of the week when I got my pension. In the meantime, I continued to live in a motel, saving every dollar. I decided not to touch the money Elliot had given me. It was my safety net in case of unexpected expenses. Elliot didn't call. Not once in 2 weeks. He didn't ask how I was settling in or if I needed any help. It was as if I had never existed in his life. It hurt deeper than I could have imagined. It's one thing to kick someone out in a fit of anger, but it's quite another to forget them, to erase them from your life. I still haven't told Octavia the whole truth. In our phone conversations, I said that I had decided to live separately, that Elliot and I needed space. She sensed that I was hiding something, but she didn't press me. My proud, intelligent girl. She always understood me better than my son. On the 15th day of my new life, something happened that changed everything. The day began as usual. Early rise, meager breakfast, planning my day. I was going to attend another job interview at a small accounting firm. I didn't have high hopes, but I had to try. On the way, I stopped at a convenience store to buy a bottle of water. The line was moving slowly. The cashier, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, was new and confused about the products. I waited patiently, looking at the colourful lottery tickets behind the glass counter. Henry and I had never been gamblers, but every month he bought a lottery ticket. "It's not for the money," he said. "It's for the dream. One day a month, we can dream about what we would do if we won $1 million. We came up with crazy plans. A trip around the world, a house by the ocean, a charitable foundation. We never won more than $20, but those dreams were worth the money." After Henry died, I continued the tradition. Every 15th of the month, I bought a ticket and spent the evening imagining what we would do with the winnings. It was my way of staying connected to him, a little ritual of remembrance. Today was the 15th of November, and even though I had money in my account, I decided not to break with tradition. "One lottery ticket, please," I said when it was my turn. "Which one?" asked the cashier, pointing to a display case with dozens of different tickets. "Mega Millions," I replied. Henry always chose that one. The biggest dreams for the smallest price, as he used to say. The cashier handed me the ticket. I paid and headed to my interview, tucking the ticket into my wallet and forgetting about it. The interview went predictably badly. The owner of the firm, a man about my age, was polite but adamant. They needed someone with knowledge of modern accounting software, willing to work full-time and often stay late. I didn't fit the bill in any way. When I got back to the motel, I felt devastated. Fatigue was setting in and my hope was fading. Maybe I should call Octavia after all, tell her the truth and accept her help. But my pride wouldn't let me. I had to do this on my own. In the evening, I turned on the TV. The Mega Millions lottery was on. I took out my ticket, preparing for my monthly ritual of dreaming. The host, a man with a dazzling smile, announced that today's jackpot was $17 million. Not a bad amount to dream about. The draw began. One by one, the balls with numbers fell out. I automatically checked them against my ticket, not expecting anything special. The first number matched. Funny, I thought. The second one too. Coincidence. It happens. The third, fourth, fifth, they all matched. I froze, not believing my eyes. There was one ball left, the golden one. My ticket had the number 22 on it. And the golden ball for today's draw is 22, announced the host. I looked at the screen, then at my ticket, then back at the screen. It was impossible. Unreal. I checked the numbers again, slowly, carefully. Everything matched. All 6 numbers. I had won the jackpot, $17 million. My first reaction was laughter. Hysterical. Uncontrollable. I laughed until I cried, until I hiccuped, until my stomach hurt. Then fear set in. What would I do with all that money? How would I get it? Who would I tell? Who not to tell? Then came disbelief. I had to be wrong. This couldn't be happening to me. Not now, not after everything that had happened. I sat down on the bed, trying to calm down. A deep breath, a slow exhale, again, again. When my heartbeat slowed down a little, I checked the numbers again. There was no doubt. I had really won. My first impulse was to call Elliot, to share my joy, to tell him that everything would be fine now, that I could buy a house, that I wouldn't be a burden. But something stopped me. The image of his face that night when he kicked me out flashed before my eyes. "You're useless, get out!" The coldness in his eyes, the indifference with which he threw me out of his life. No, I wouldn't call Elliot. Not now. Maybe never. Instead, I called the lottery hotline number on the back of the ticket. The answering machine said the office was closed and listed the hours. I would have to wait until morning. I hardly slept that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how my life would change. $17 million, an unimaginable amount of money, more than I had earned in my entire life. More than I could spend in the rest of my life. In the morning, I was the first in line at the lottery office. The employee, a middle-aged woman with a friendly smile, checked my ticket and confirmed that I had indeed won the jackpot. "Congratulations," she said, shaking my hand. "You'll need to fill out some forms and we'll explain your options for receiving your winnings." The next few hours passed in a blur. I filled out paperwork, listened to explanations about taxes, lump sum payments versus annual payments, and the need to hire a financial advisor and a lawyer. I was offered the services of a sudden wealth advisor. Apparently that's a real profession. Many lottery winners lose all their money within a few years, and these specialists help them avoid that. I chose the lump sum payment. After all the taxes and fees, I was supposed to receive about $9 million. Still an incredible amount. "There's one more important thing," said the employee. "By law, we have to announce the winner publicly. Your name, city of residence, and the amount you won will be published. We'll also hold a press conference if you agree." I didn't want publicity, but judging by what she said, I didn't have a choice. Although, "Is it possible to remain anonymous?" I asked. "Perhaps through a trust fund or something similar?" "That's not possible in our state," she shook her head. "But you can minimize publicity by declining the press conference. We'll just issue a press release with your name and city." I chose that option. The last thing I wanted was to see my face on the front page of the newspaper. "When will the press release be published?" I asked. "Within 48 hours. The money will be transferred to your account approximately 2 weeks after all checks have been completed." I thanked her and left the office, still not quite believing what had happened. In my hands, I held a copy of the claim form. The only tangible proof that this wasn't a dream. When I got back to the motel, the first thing I did was call Octavia. She deserved to hear the news first. "Mum, is something wrong?" Her voice sounded worried. I rarely called during work hours. "Honey, are you sitting down?" I asked. "You're scaring me. Is something wrong with Elliot, with the kids?" No, everything's fine. It's just..." I took a deep breath. "I won the lottery." "Really? How much? $20?" She laughed. $17 million. Silence on the line. Then, Mum, if this is a joke. No jokes. I just got back from the lottery office. It's official. I'm a millionaire, Octavia. She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Then came a barrage of questions: how, when, where, what I was going to do with the money. I answered as best I could, still in a state of semi-shock. Have you told Elliot yet? She finally asked. No. My voice grew harder. And I don't intend to. Not yet. Why not? She asked, surprised. This is amazing news. I hesitated. It was time to tell her the truth. Octavia, I need to explain something to you. I didn't just decide to move out. Elliot kicked me out in the middle of the night, 2 weeks ago. What? Her voice turned icy. He kicked you out? Why? I told her everything. About the growing tension, the argument, his words. You're no use to me, get out. She listened silently, only occasionally gasping in indignation. I'll kill him, she said when I finished. How could he do that to you? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to worry you. You have your own life, your own problems. Mom, she exclaimed, you're my mother. Your problems are my problems. I would have flown over immediately and taken you in. That's exactly why I didn't tell you, I sighed. I didn't want to be a burden. You've never been a burden, her voice softened. Not to me, not to Elliot. He's the selfish jerk, not you. I smiled, feeling my heart warm at her words. Anyway, everything's different now, I said. With all that money, I can do whatever I want. Buy a house, travel, help you and your kids. What about Elliot? She asked. When the news of the win becomes public, he'll find out. He'll try to contact you, apologize. What are you going to do? It was a question I had been asking myself since I won. What to do with Elliot? Forgive him? Help him financially, despite what he did? Or cut him out of my life completely, just as he tried to cut me out? I don't know, I replied honestly, but I'm not going to rush into a decision. Let him suffer a little. He deserves more than a little, Octavia snorted. But it's your decision. Just remember that you don't owe him anything. Nothing. After talking to my daughter, I felt better. The truth was out and some of the weight was lifted off my shoulders. Now I had to decide what to do next. I sat down at the table and started making a plan. The first item was housing. I needed to find a decent apartment where I could live until I decided whether I wanted to stay in Des Plaines or move to another city. Second, I needed to hire a financial advisor and a lawyer, as the lottery office had advised. Third, I needed to think about long-term investments so that my money would work for me. What about Elliot? I put that problem on hold for later. First, I needed to get my life in order. I spent the next 2 days looking at apartment listings, talking to financial experts on the phone, and planning my next steps. I decided not to make any big purchases or important decisions for the time being, as the experts advised. Too many lottery winners lost everything because of impulsive spending. On the third day after winning, the lottery office issued a press release. Marilyn Pemberton of Des Plaines has won the Mega Millions jackpot of $17 million, the headline read. It was a short note, but it was enough to turn my life upside down. The phone rang an hour after the release. It was Elliot. I didn't answer. He called again, and again. By evening, I had 16 missed calls from him. He also sent several messages. Mom, is it true? Did you win the lottery? Mom, please answer. We're worried about you. Mom, we need to talk. It's important. I didn't answer. A petty but sweet feeling of satisfaction spread inside me. Now he wanted to talk to me. Now I was important. The next day, the calls continued. 21 missed calls. The messages became more desperate. Mom, I understand that you're angry with me. I was wrong. Please, let's talk. Mom, the kids miss you. They're asking when you're coming back. Mom, I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean to hurt you. I deleted the messages without responding. Part of me wanted to respond, to say everything that had been building up. But another, more rational part of me advised me to wait. Let the emotions settle. Let the plan mature. By the end of the week, Elliot had called 67 times. He also came to the motel, but I warned the manager in advance that I didn't want to see anyone, and he didn't let Elliot in. During that time, I found a decent apartment in a good neighborhood, hired a recommended financial advisor and lawyer, and opened a new bank account at a different bank. I was ready for a new life. And I started to form a plan for Elliot. Not a plan for revenge in the classic sense. I didn't want to hurt him or ruin his life. But I wanted him to realize the consequences of his actions. To understand that you can't throw people out of your life and then bring them back when it's convenient. That love and respect can't be bought. The plan was simple. I would agree to meet him, but on my terms. In a public place without the children or Imogen. I would listen to his apology, but I wouldn't accept it right away. Then I would tell him about my plans, about the new house I was going to buy, the trips I was planning, the financial help I would give Octavia and her children, and that I wouldn't give him a penny, only pay off the debts I knew about. No more, no less. It wasn't revenge in the full sense of the word. It was setting boundaries, demonstrating that I would no longer allow myself to be used or discarded, that I valued myself enough not to return to a place where I was not respected. When the plan was fully formed in my head, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in a long time, I was completely confident in my decision. I was no longer a helpless old woman dependent on her son's mercy. I was Marlene Pemberton, a woman who had lived 68 years, raised 2 children, survived the loss of her husband, and endured humiliation at the hands of her own son. And now I was ready to start a new chapter in my life, a chapter where I made the rules. I picked up my phone and sent Elliot a message, the first one in all this time. I'm ready to meet you on Thursday at 1 p.m. at the Bluebird Cafe. Come alone. This is not up for discussion. The reply came instantly. Thanks, Mum, I'll be there. I missed you so much. I smiled. Of course he missed me. 17 million reasons to miss me. Putting down my phone, I walked over to the window. It was snowing outside, the first snow of the season. Large flakes swirled in the air, covering the world with a white blanket. A new beginning. A clean slate. Just what I needed. My move from the motel to a rented apartment took place 3 days after I won. I hired a small moving company, just 2 guys with a van, but they turned out to be pretty quick. I didn't have much. A suitcase with clothes, a box of books and photos, a laptop, and a couple of bags with some essentials I had recently purchased. My entire life fit into one van. The apartment I rented was in a modern complex not far from downtown Des Plaines. 1 bedroom, a living room combined with a kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking the park, $2,800 a month, a sum that would have seemed astronomical to me a couple of weeks ago, but now seemed like a reasonable investment in comfort. I signed a 3-month lease, not wanting to commit to anything long-term until I decided where I wanted to live permanently. My first day in my new place was spent rushing around, unpacking, buying groceries, and setting up the space. I ordered delivery of basic furniture, a sofa, a dining table, a couple of chairs, and a table lamp. Everything else could wait. After a month in a motel, even such minimalism seemed like luxury. In the evening, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, and looked at the park below. The snow that had fallen the day before had already begun to melt, revealing brown earth and bare tree branches. Winter in Illinois had always been unpredictable. Snow could fall and melt right away, leaving only slush and dampness behind. I thought about how quickly my life had changed. Just a month ago, I was part of a family, albeit an unwanted one. 2 weeks ago, I was sleeping in a cheap motel, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. And now I was a millionaire, sitting in my spacious apartment and planning a future in which I would no longer be dependent on anyone. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Elliot. Again. I didn't answer, just like all the other times. Let him wait until I'm ready to talk to him. Let him suffer in uncertainty, just like I did that night when he kicked me out of the house. A minute later, a message arrived. Mum, please answer. We need to talk. I want to apologize in person. The kids miss you. I smiled. Now he had something to say. Now he wanted to see me. I wondered if he would be so persistent if he hadn't won the lottery. If I had just lived in that tiny studio I found before the lottery, scraping by on bread and water. I got up early in the morning out of old habit. I made myself a hearty breakfast: eggs, toast, freshly squeezed orange juice. Simple pleasures I could now afford without worrying about my budget. After breakfast, I called the financial advisor my lawyer had hired for me. Jasper Rodriguez, a young man with a pleasant voice and impeccable references, had already prepared a preliminary financial plan. Mrs. Pemberton, given your age and life situation, I recommend a conservative approach to investing, he began. We can put most of the money in reliable bonds and fixed income funds. This will provide you with a steady stream of income and preserve your capital. What about real estate? I asked. I'm thinking about buying a house. That's a wise decision, especially in the current market. Real estate in a good neighborhood will only go up in value. But I would advise you not to rush into a decision and not to spend more than 10 to 15% of the total amount. We discussed a few more issues: tax obligations, possible charitable contributions, they offered tax breaks, and estate planning. Jasper was knowledgeable and didn't try to pressure me, for which I was grateful. After talking to him, I called my lawyer, Veronica Lane. She was older than Jasper and had a more direct approach. Mrs. Pemberton, I strongly recommend that you make a new will, she said without preamble. In your situation, it's critical. You're right, I agreed. I have an old will, but it needs to be updated. You should also consider setting up a trust fund for your grandchildren, she continued. This will protect their interests in the long term and ensure that the funds are used for their intended purpose. I thought about it. Holden and Willow, Elliot's children. I loved them unconditionally, despite all the problems with their father. They weren't to blame for his actions, but how could I secure their future without giving Elliot and Imogen direct access to the money? Is it possible to set up a trust fund that the parents won't have access to? I asked. The funds should only be used for the children's education and needs. Absolutely, Veronica replied confidently. We can structure the fund so that it is managed by an independent trustee. The parents would not have direct access to the funds. That suited me. I didn't want to deprive my grandchildren of their inheritance because of my resentment toward their father, but I also didn't want Elliot to have control over the money. Veronica also advised me to be careful in my communications with my son and not to make hasty decisions based on my emotions. In situations like this, people often try to take advantage of their relatives' sudden wealth, she warned. Be attentive to the intentions of those around you. I thanked her for her advice. Although in Elliot's case, I didn't need any warnings. His intentions were as clear as glass. After lunch, Octavia called me. She was the only one I told the whole truth about the win and the situation with Elliot. How are you, Mum? Her voice sounded worried. Is Elliot still bothering you? He calls every hour, I sighed. He sends messages begging to meet. I'm not answering him yet. You're doing the right thing, she said approvingly. Let him suffer, he deserves it. It's not about suffering, I objected. I'm just not ready to talk to him. I'm afraid I'll say something I shouldn't, or on the contrary, I'll give in to my emotions and forgive him too easily. I understand, Octavia said after a pause. He's your son, after all, no matter what. Yes, I sighed her, and that's the hardest part. It would be easier if he were just a tenant who treated me badly. But he's my flesh and blood. I can't just cut him out of my life, no matter how much I want to sometimes. We talked a little more, discussing my plans for the future. Octavia offered to fly over for a few days to help me get settled and just be there for me during this difficult time. I gratefully accepted her offer. I'll fly out on Friday, she said. I'll book the tickets tonight. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, feeling tears welling up in my throat. You have no idea how much this means to me. After talking to my daughter, I felt a surge of energy. I spent the rest of the day looking at listings for houses in Days Plains and the surrounding area. Despite my resentment toward Elliot, I didn't want to move too far away from my grandchildren. They were an important part of my life, and I wasn't going to let their father's actions destroy our bond. I found several interesting options. Beautiful houses with gardens in nice neighbourhoods, not far from the school where Holden and Willow went. I marked them for further investigation with my real estate agent. That evening, Elliot sent another message. Mum, Holden got an A in math. He said it was because of your lessons. He really wants to tell you himself. Please call. It was low to use the children to get to me, but I couldn't deny that I missed my grandchildren. Maybe I should arrange to see them, without Elliot and Imogen. I was mulling over the idea when the doorbell rang. I tensed. No one knew my new address except the lawyers and Octavia. Had Elliot tracked me down somehow? Approaching the door cautiously, I looked through the peephole. A delivery man was standing in the hallway with a bouquet of flowers. I relaxed a little, but still opened the door cautiously. Marilyn Pemberton? The delivery man asked. Yes, that's me, I replied. Delivery for you, he said, handing me a huge bouquet of red roses and a small box. I signed for it and closed the door. Attached to the bouquet was a card. Mum, please give me a chance to make things right. Elliot. I sighed. He wasn't giving up. I had to give him that. The small box contained a gold bracelet with a heart-shaped pendant. Expensive, but tasteless. Not my style at all. Elliot didn't even know what kind of jewellery I liked. I put the bracelet on the table and arranged the flowers in a vase. Despite the circumstances, I didn't want to throw away the flowers. But I wasn't going to accept this gesture as sincere remorse either. It would be too easy to buy forgiveness with expensive gifts. The next morning, I met with Jasper at his office to discuss the details of the financial plan. He showed me tables, graphs, calculations. Everything looked impressive and professional. If we follow this plan, he explained, pointing to one of the graphs, your capital will not only be preserved, but will also increase, despite the regular payments you will be receiving. What about inflation? I asked. In 40 years of working with taxes, I had learned to ask the right questions. Jasper smiled, clearly pleased with my financial literacy. We factored inflation into our calculations. Here. He pointed to another table. You can see the projected growth adjusted for inflation. We worked for another hour, after which I signed several documents, giving Jasper the authority to begin implementing the plan as soon as the money arrived in my account. After meeting with my financial advisor, I went to a nice restaurant for lunch, simply because I could afford it. I ordered lobster and a glass of expensive wine, enjoying the little pleasures that had previously been out of reach. As I was finishing my lunch, my phone rang again. It was Elliot. I sighed and pressed decline. A minute later, a message arrived. Mom, did you get the flowers? Please, let's talk. I'll do anything you say. Just give me a chance. I didn't reply. Not yet. When I got home, I resumed my search for a house. This time, I expanded my search area to include Portland, where Octavia lived. Maybe it was worth having two homes, one here, close to my grandchildren, and another in Oregon, near my daughter. With my new financial resources, it was entirely possible. In the evening, Octavia called to confirm that she was flying in on Friday as planned. I told her about Elliot's gift. He's trying to buy your forgiveness, she snorted. Typical of him. I know, I sighed. But what am I supposed to do? I can't ignore him forever. Why not? Her voice was challenging. He ignored you for years, treated you like a servant, and then threw you out on the street. Why should you give him another chance? Because he's my son, I replied quietly, and because I'm better than him. Octavia paused, then sighed. You're right, Mom, you've always been better than all of us, but promise me you won't let him manipulate you. I promise, I said firmly. I've forgiven a lot, but I haven't forgotten anything. The next few days were spent preparing for Octavia's arrival. I bought groceries, ordered extra furniture to make her comfortable, and made a list of places we could visit together. Elliot kept calling and texting, but I still didn't answer. I was waiting for my daughter to arrive so we could decide together what to do next. On Thursday, the day before Octavia's arrival, I received official notification from the bank that the money had been deposited into my account. $9,200,000 after all taxes and fees. I stared at the numbers on my laptop screen, and they seemed unreal. So much money. Enough for several lifetimes. So many possibilities. So much freedom. I called Jasper to tell him the news. He congratulated me and promised to start implementing our financial plan immediately. Then I contacted Veronica to speed up the process of setting up trust funds for my grandchildren. In the evening, I sat on the balcony watching the sunset and thinking about my new life. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. But this time, it wasn't Elliot. It was the manager of the Blue Moon Motel, where I had lived before moving into the apartment. "Mrs. Pemberton," he began, "I'm sorry to bother you, but your son is here. He's looking for you, very insistently. I told him you had left and didn't leave a new address, but he doesn't believe me. Maybe you could talk to him." I sighed. Elliot was becoming more and more insistent. Soon he would start calling hospitals or even the police. "Thank you for calling," I replied. "Tell him I'm fine, but I'm not ready to talk. If he insists, you have every right to call security." "All right, Mrs. Pemberton," said the administrator, relief evident in his voice. "I'll pass that along." After that call, I realized I couldn't avoid Elliot forever. I had to meet with him, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and move on. But first, I wanted to wait for Octavia to arrive so I could discuss my strategy for the conversation with her. On Friday morning, I received another message from Elliot. "Mum, I was at your motel. They said you left. I'm worried. Please let me know you're okay. Or I'll start calling hospitals." I decided to reply briefly and curtly. "I'm fine. I've moved. Don't worry or look for me. I'll contact you when I'm ready." His reply came instantly. "Thank God, I was so worried. When can we meet? The kids miss you. I do too." I didn't reply. Instead, I headed to the airport to pick up Octavia. Her flight was arriving at 1 p.m, and I wanted to be there early. When I saw my daughter coming out of the arrivals area, my heart filled with warmth. Tall, slender, with my features and personality, she had always been my pride and joy. We hugged each other so tightly, as if we hadn't seen each other in years, even though it had only been a few months. "Mum, you look amazing," she exclaimed, looking me over. "You're glowing." "Money works wonders," I smiled. "No, it's not the money," she shook her head. "You look free, like you've shed a heavy burden." She was right. Despite all the pain and humiliation, I felt freer than I had in years. No more catering to Imogen's whims, no more putting up with Elliot's contempt, no more feeling like I didn't belong. On the way home, I told Octavia about Elliot's harassment. The calls, the messages, the flowers, his visit to the motel. She listened intently, occasionally snorting indignantly or shaking her head. "He won't give up until he gets what he wants," she concluded. "He's always been like that, persistent to the point of stubbornness." "I know," I sighed. "That's why I think I need to meet with him. Once, on my terms. Dot all the I's and cross all the T's and move on." "Are you sure?" She frowned. "He doesn't deserve your attention." "It's not for him," I shook my head. "It's for me. To close this chapter and move on. And for the children. I want to be able to see them without constant tension." Octavia hugged me. "I'll support whatever you decide, Mum. Just don't let him hurt you again." "I won't," I replied firmly. "Never again." Octavia flew out 4 days later. We spent that time making plans for the future, looking at houses I had found, and simply enjoying each other's company. There was something very right about it being my daughter, not my son, who was there for me at this turning point in my life. Before she left, Octavia helped me make a list of things I wanted to say to Elliot. We sat in the kitchen with cups of tea, and I listed the points while she wrote them down on a piece of paper. "The main thing is not to get emotional," Octavia said, writing neatly. "Stick to the facts. He'll try to play on your pity, make you feel guilty, appeal to your maternal instincts. Don't give in." "I know," I nodded. "He's already trying to use the children to get to me." "Typical of him," she snorted. "But remember, you can maintain a relationship with your grandchildren without supporting him." She was right, and I was grateful to her for her firm, practical support. Unlike many children, Octavia never tried to make decisions for me or control my actions. She respected my independence, even when she was worried about me. The day after Octavia left, I decided it was time to face Elliot. I dialed his number, feeling my heart pound in my chest. He answered on the first ring, as if he had been holding the phone waiting for my call. "Mum?" His voice sounded uncertain, as if he couldn't believe it was really me. "Hello, Elliot," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm ready to meet you." "Really?" He sounded delighted. "When? Where? I can come right now, wherever you want." "Not so fast," I stopped him. "I'll arrange a meeting for tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Silver Spoon restaurant." I chose this restaurant deliberately. It was expensive, elegant, with separate booths for privacy. A place where we would both be forced to observe the rules of decorum. "The Silver Spoon?" he asked in surprise. "But that's very, expensive?" I finished for him. "Yes, it is. I'll reserve a table in my name." "Okay," he agreed quickly. 2 o'clock, I'll be there." "And Elliot," I added, "come alone. No Imogen, no kids. This is just between us." "Of course, Mum." His voice sounded submissive. "Whatever you say." After the conversation, I called the restaurant and made a reservation for 2. Then I spent the rest of the day mentally rehearsing what I wanted to say to my son. I had to be firm, but fair. Clear, but not cruel. I didn't want to stoop to his level. I didn't want to hurt him just to get revenge. I just wanted to protect myself and move on. That evening, I spent a long time choosing what to wear. I settled on an elegant ivory pantsuit, expensive, but not flashy. I accessorized it with simple pearl earrings that Henry had given me on our 30th wedding anniversary. I wanted to look confident and dignified, not like a lost old woman who could be intimidated or pitied. In the morning before the meeting, I received another message from Elliot. "Looking forward to seeing you, Mum. I have so much to say." I didn't reply. Soon we would talk in person and everything would be said. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes before the appointed time. The maitre d' showed me to our reserved table, a cosy booth in the far corner of the room with a view of the garden. I ordered tea and waited. Elliot arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, not a minute early, not a minute late. He was always punctual. At least you could count on him for that. He was wearing a suit, clearly not new, but it fit well. His hair was neatly combed and he was clean-shaven. He was trying to make a good impression. It was obvious. The maitre d' showed him to my table. Elliot smiled nervously, clearly unsure how to greet me. Hug, kiss on the cheek, shake hands. In the end, he just nodded and sat down across from me. "Mum," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me. You look beautiful." "Thank you, Elliot," I replied neutrally. The waiter approached and we ordered. I chose a light salad and mineral water. Elliot chose a steak and a glass of wine. When the waiter left, there was an awkward pause. "So," Elliot finally said, "how are you? Where do you live?" I was worried. "I'm fine," I interrupted him. "I rented an apartment in a nice neighborhood. I'm going to buy a house soon." That's wonderful," he tried to smile. "I'm so glad you're doing well. After everything that happened? After you kicked me out of the house in the middle of the night?" I wasn't going to make it easy for him. He looked down. "Yes, after that. Mum, I want to apologize. What I did was unforgivable. I wasn't myself, I was angry, tired. But that's no excuse. I behaved terribly and I have no excuse." He sounded sincere, but there was something in his eyes, a calculating gleam that betrayed his true motives. He wasn't so much sorry for what he had done as he was sorry for the consequences, for losing access to my money. "Why didn't you look for me during the first 2 weeks?" I asked bluntly. "Why did you only start calling after you heard about the win?" He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I thought you wouldn't want to talk to me. That you needed time, and I didn't know where to find you. And then you suddenly found out?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, but," he faltered. "The news about the win. I realized I had to find you, make sure you were okay. That no one was trying to cheat you or use you. Except you." It was a statement, not a question. He flinched as if I had hit him. "Mum, if you think I'm here for the money—" "Isn't that why you're here?" I interrupted. "Be honest with me, Elliot. Would you have looked for me so desperately if I hadn't won the lottery?" He opened his mouth to argue, but then closed it and lowered his head. I would have looked for you anyway, he finally said, but maybe not so quickly, and not so desperately. I'm ashamed to admit it, but yes, the news of the win was a catalyst. I nodded, strangely satisfied by his honesty. At least he wasn't lying now. Thanks for being honest, I said. That's rare in our relationship. Our food arrived and we ate in silence for a while. I watched my son looking for signs of stress, tensed shoulders, nervous movements, an evasive gaze. He was clearly preparing for something, gathering his courage. Mom, he finally said, putting down his fork. I know I screwed up, I know I hurt you, but we're a family. Don't families forgive each other? Families don't throw each other out on the street, I replied evenly. Families don't tell each other they're no good. He flinched at his own words. You're right, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But the kids, they didn't do anything wrong. They miss you. Holden asks every day when you're coming back. Willow cries at night. It was a low blow to use the kids to get to me. But he was right about one thing. The kids really weren't to blame for our problems. I'll see the kids, I said more gently, but on neutral ground, without you and Imogen. Of course, whatever you say, he agreed quickly. They'll be happy to see you in any format. There was a pause. I could see him gathering his courage for the next question. What about us? He finally asked. Is there any chance that one day you'll be able to forgive me? That we can be a family again? I looked at him closely. There was hope in his eyes, but also calculation. He was still thinking about the money, about how to regain access to this unexpected wealth. Elliot, I began, choosing my words carefully. I will always be your mother. Nothing will change that. But our relationship will never be the same. Too much has been said and done. Some things cannot be fixed or forgotten. But Mom, let me finish. I raised my hand, stopping him. I've made some decisions and I want you to know what they are. He sat up straight, all attention on me. First, I'm moving out of Dade Plain. I bought a house in Portland, not far from Octavia and her family. It's a beautiful house with a garden where I can start a new life. Portland? He paled. But that's on the other side of the country. Yes, I nodded. I need to distance myself from painful memories. He lowered his eyes, taking the blow. I understand, he muttered. But the children? I already told you I'll see them, I reminded him. They can come visit me on vacation. I'll pay for their tickets, of course. Of course, he echoed. Secondly, I continued, I've set up trust funds for all my grandchildren. Your children and Octavia's children. These funds will cover their education and other needs. His eyes lit up at the mention of money. That's very generous of you, Mom. The children will... But, I interrupted, only the children themselves will have access to these funds when they reach the age of majority. Until then, the funds will be managed by an independent trustee whom I have appointed. Neither you nor Imogen will have the right to withdraw money from these accounts. His face fell. You don't trust us to manage money for our own children? No, I replied simply. I don't. He swallowed, clearly holding back his indignation. I understand, he finally said. It's your money, your decision. Exactly, I nodded. And one last thing. I know about your financial problems, Elliot, about the late mortgage payments, the credit cards, the debts. I'll pay them off. Every last penny. His face brightened. Really? Mum, this is... But that's all, I finished firmly. No more money. No regular payments. No gifts. I'll give you a clean slate, but from now on, you're responsible for your own finances. His smile faded. I understand, he said, trying to hide his disappointment, but not very successfully. Thank you for that. That's very generous. It's not generosity, I shook my head. It's caring about my grandchildren. I don't want them to lose their home or suffer because of your financial problems. He nodded, accepting my words. Well, he said after a pause, when are you leaving? Next Wednesday, I replied. I've already arranged for a moving company to transport my belongings. So soon? He looked genuinely upset. Will we see each other before you leave? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to end it all right there and then. But another part, the mother part, couldn't be that cruel. Yes, I finally said. I'll come by to say goodbye to the kids on Tuesday, around 4 after school. Thank you. He looked genuinely grateful. They'll be happy to see you. We finished lunch in a relatively peaceful atmosphere. Elliot talked about the children, their successes at school, their plans for the summer vacation. I listened, asking questions from time to time, but keeping an emotional distance. There was no longer the warmth, the closeness that should be between a mother and her son. Too much had changed. Too much had been lost. When we said goodbye at the restaurant exit, he hesitantly stepped toward me as if he wanted to hug me. I let him. A short, formal hug, nothing like the warm embraces we used to share. See you Tuesday, Mom, he said, pulling away. Thanks for dinner. And for everything else. See you Tuesday, Elliot, I replied, not commenting on his thanks. What was there to thank me for? For not leaving him homeless? For taking care of his children despite what he had done? It wasn't nobility on my part, just humanity. I watched him walk to his car, hunched over, aged, disappointed. Part of me felt sorry for him, but most of me felt only a calm determination to move on. The next few days were spent in a flurry of activity. Final preparations for the move, packing, saying goodbye to my few acquaintances in Des Plaines. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, sadness at leaving the city where I had spent most of my life, and excitement about the new beginning that lay ahead. On Tuesday, as promised, I arrived at Elliot's house. It was the first time I had been back there since the night he kicked me out. A strange feeling of déjà vu came over me as I parked on the curb. It seemed like an eternity had passed, even though it had only been a few weeks. Elliot opened the door himself. He looked nervous but tried to smile. "Mom, come in," he said. "The kids are waiting for you. They're so excited." I entered the house feeling strangely detached. This was no longer my home. I was a guest here, a visitor from another life. Holden and Willow rushed toward me like little hurricanes, hugging me and exclaiming, "Grandma, you're back!" "We missed you so much." I hugged them back, feeling my heart tighten with love and regret. I was really going to miss them. Their laughter, their little secrets, our activities together. "I missed you too, my darlings," I said, kissing them on the tops of their heads. "How you've grown in just a few weeks." They laughed, not realizing I was only half joking. They really did seem taller, older than when I had last seen them. Or maybe it was my perception that had changed. Imogen stood apart, watching our reunion with an unreadable expression on her face. I nodded to her, and she nodded back, a silent truce for the sake of the children. We spent 2 hours together. I told the children about my new home in Portland and showed them photos on my phone. I promised they could come visit during summer vacation to see the ocean and play in the big garden. "Are you not going to live with us anymore?" Willow asked, her little face serious and worried. "No, sweetie," I replied gently. "Grandma is going to live in her own house now, but we'll see each other often. I promise." "Why are you moving so far away?" Holden asked, more direct as always. "Is it because Dad told you to leave?" I froze, not knowing how to respond. Elliot, who was standing in the doorway, turned pale. "Partly," I finally said, deciding not to lie to them. "But also because I want to be closer to Aunt Octavia and your cousins. And because sometimes adults need space from each other, even if they love each other." Holden nodded thoughtfully, accepting this explanation. Willow just clung to me tighter, as if afraid I would disappear right then and there. When it was time to go, the children didn't want to let me leave. They clung to my arms, begging me to stay a little longer, just a minute. "I have to go, sweethearts," I said gently. "I have an important day tomorrow, but we'll see each other soon, I promise." Finally, with the help of Imogen, who showed unexpected tact by suggesting that the children help her prepare a special dessert, I was able to say goodbye. Elliot walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "It means a lot to the kids, and to me." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Despite everything that had happened, Part of me still saw him as the little boy I had loved so much. "Goodbye, Elliot," I finally said. "Take care of the kids. And yourself, too." "This isn't goodbye, Mum," he said. "We'll see each other. I'll bring the kids in the summer, like you promised." "Of course," I agreed, though deep down I doubted he would. When it came to keeping promises, Elliot was rarely reliable. I left without looking back. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I got into the car, but I quickly wiped them away. These weren't tears of regret, but rather tears of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. On Wednesday morning, the moving company arrived. 3 strong young men quickly and efficiently loaded my belongings into the truck. I took one last look around the apartment that had been my home during those strange, turbulent weeks. Here I had cried in despair and laughed with joy. Here I was starting a new chapter in my life. Before leaving, I made one more important phone call to Elliot's bank. I confirmed the transfer of money to pay off his mortgage and other debts in full. As I had promised, he would have a clean slate, but nothing more. Then I got into my new car, an elegant sedan I had bought with cash a week earlier, and set off. I decided to drive rather than fly so I could enjoy the journey, see the country, and feel the freedom of the open road. As I left Des Plaines, I drove past Elliot's house. I didn't stop or honk, just took one last look. The house looked exactly the same as it always had, neat and suburban with a trimmed lawn and children's bikes on the driveway. But to me, it was a symbol of my past life, a life where I was dependent, where I was valued only for the services I could provide. Now a new road lay ahead of me, literally and metaphorically. I didn't know exactly what awaited me in Portland, except for a warm welcome from Octavia and her family. I didn't know how my life would unfold, what new joys and sorrows it would bring, but I knew one thing: I would never let anyone treat me the way Elliot had. I deserved better, and now I had the means to make sure of it. I turned on the radio and tuned in to a classical music station. The sounds of Mozart filled the car as I pulled onto the highway. The road stretched out ahead of me, leading west to a new beginning. I smiled, feeling a strange sense of calm and confidence. At 68, I was starting over, and maybe now I was truly ready for it. Elliot was behind me, with his regrets, his disappointment, his realization that some actions cannot be undone, some words cannot be taken back. "You're no use to me. Go away." Those words changed our relationship forever, but they also freed me, showed me my son's true colors, and forced me to find strength I never knew I had. In the rearview mirror, I watched Des Plaines grow smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared from view. I didn't look back. My life was now ahead of me, and I was ready for it, with all its uncertainties, with all its possibilities. Free, independent, and for the first time in a long time, truly happy.